Admiral Zexthara stood before the crystalline viewport of the Kithara flagship Eternal Dominion, her 4 arms clasped behind her chitinous back as she gazed upon the fertile world of Haven. The planet rotated slowly beneath them, its green continents and blue oceans representing another easy conquest for the Empire. Her violet eyes, compound and multifaceted like those of her insectoid race, reflected the satisfaction of a predator eyeing helpless prey. "Status report, Commander Valkes," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of 1,000 conquered worlds. The younger Kithara officer's antennae twitched nervously as he consulted his holographic display. "The agricultural colony shows no defensive capabilities, Admiral. Population, approximately 50,000 humans and various refugee species. No military installations detected. Their largest structure appears to be a grain silo." Zexthara's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Humans," she mused, speaking the word like one might discuss an extinct curiosity. "How fitting that our latest conquest should involve the remnants of the legendary ghost warriors. Though I suppose these are merely the descendants of survivors who fled their homeworlds before the Great Burning." Around the bridge, younger officers exchanged glances. The tale of humanity's self-destruction was a cornerstone of Kithara culture, a cautionary story told to prevent other species from choosing annihilation over submission. According to imperial records, humans had been so fierce, so utterly devoted to warfare, that when faced with inevitable defeat, they had chosen to ignite their own worlds in nuclear fire rather than bow to any master. "My grandmother used to tell me those stories," whispered Communications Officer Trillana to her console partner. "She said human warriors were so terrifying that they could kill a Kithara with their bare hands, that they felt no fear, no pain." "Fairy tales," scoffed Tactical Officer Hexmar. "Useful for keeping the colonies in line, but hardly based in reality. If humans were truly so dangerous, how did they manage to extinct themselves?" Admiral Zexthara's hearing was acute. "The stories serve their purpose, officers. Fear of the unknown keeps species compliant. The truth is far more mundane. Humans were simply another aggressive species that chose self-destruction over wisdom." She turned back to the viewport, her reflection multiplied endlessly in the crystal. "Today, we add the last human world to our empire. Begin the invasion sequence." As the massive Kithara fleet of 300 warships moved into attack formation, none aboard could have imagined that their enemy already knew they were coming. In the depths of space, cloaked beyond the range of Kithara sensors, ancient human vessels had been watching, waiting, and preparing for this moment for over 2 centuries. The ghost warriors were about to become terrifyingly real. Captain Elena. Vasquez stood in the observation deck of the human dreadnought Remembrance, her weathered hands pressed against the reinforced transparisteel as she watched the Kithara fleet descend toward Haven. At 65, she was old enough to remember the evacuation of Earth Prime, young enough to have spent her entire adult life preparing for this day. Her steel-gray hair was pulled back in a military bun, and her dark eyes held the weight of centuries of exile and preparation. "Signal from the Defiance, Captain," reported Lieutenant Commander Chun from the communications station. "Admiral Morrison is requesting final confirmation to execute Protocol Lazarus." Elena's jaw tightened. Protocol Lazarus, the moment humanity revealed itself to the galaxy again. After 247 years of hiding in the dark spaces between stars, of building ships in asteroid fields and training in the void, they were finally ready to emerge from their self-imposed exile. "Tell the Admiral he has confirmation," Galena replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "And Chun? Signal all ships. Today, we remind the galaxy why they feared the Ghost Warriors. The Bridge of the Remembrance was unlike any Kithara vessel, where the Empire favored gleaming surfaces and displays of wealth. Human ships were built for function. Every surface was covered in tactical displays, damage control stations, and weapon controls. The crew moved with the precision of people who had trained their entire lives for this moment. "Ma'am," called out Tactical Officer Rodriguez, "Kithara. Fleet is beginning atmospheric entry. They're using standard Imperial protocol orbital bombardment, followed by ground assault. Ada to first strike. 14 minutes. Elena nodded grimly. She had studied Kithara tactics for decades, knew their arrogance would be their downfall. They expected no resistance from a primitive agricultural world. They would learn the error of their assumptions. On Haven's surface, the colonists were already moving to predetermined shelters. Unlike the peaceful farmers the Kithara expected, these were descendants of humanity's greatest military minds, people who had spent generations preparing for this exact scenario. The grain silos the Kithara had dismissed were actually concealed. Weapons platforms. The peaceful agricultural equipment included some of the most sophisticated anti-orbital defenses ever created. "Captain," called Navigation Officer Park, "we're receiving tight beam communications from the other fleet groups. Ghost Squadron reports ready. Wraith Squadron reports ready. All 7 battle groups are in position and awaiting your signal." Elena closed her eyes for a moment, remembering her grandfather's stories of the Great Evacuation, how humanity had faked its own extinction to escape the Kithara's notice, how they had spent over 2 centuries building a hidden empire among the asteroids. And dead worlds. The galaxy thought humans had burned themselves out of existence. They were about to learn that Phoenix fire only made them stronger. "All stations, battle stations," Elena commanded. "Decloak all vessels. Show them what ghosts look like when they're angry." Throughout the vast emptiness of space, 1,847 human warships materialized like specters emerging from the void, their hulls dark as space itself, their weapons already charging for the fight of their lives. Admiral Zexthara felt the first tremor of unease when her sensor officer's voice cracked. With disbelief. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. Unknown contacts, thousands of them." The Kithara flagship's main viewer shifted to display the tactical overview, and what Zexthara saw defied everything she believed about the universe. Ships sleek, dark vessels that seemed to absorb light itself were materializing around her fleet like predators emerging from tall grass. The elegant, crystalline forms of Kithara warships suddenly seemed fragile and exposed. "Impossible," breathed Commander Velkas, his 4 hands dancing across his instruments. "The readings suggest these ships have been here all along, just invisible." "Cloaking technology," Zexthara hissed, her compound eyes reflecting the growing tactical display. "But no known species possesses stealth capabilities this advanced. The ships are." She stopped, her violet blood turning cold as recognition. Dawned, the angular hulls, the predatory silhouettes, the way they moved with perfect coordination. These matched the ancient fragmented images from archaeological sites, the ones dismissed as artistic interpretation. "Communications incoming," reported Officer Trillana, her voice trembling. It's on all frequencies simultaneously. The signal is impossibly strong." "Put it through," Zexthara commanded, though her mandibles clicked nervously. The voice that filled the bridge was distinctly human deep, measured, and carrying an authority that made the Kithara officers instinctively step back. "This is Admiral James Morrison of the Human Star Navy. You are in violation of the Haven Accords and the Sanctuary Protocols. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Zexthara's shock gave way to fury. "Human Star Navy? Impossible. Your species destroyed itself centuries ago. We have the archaeological evidence. You have what we left for you to find." Morrison's voice cut through her protest like a blade. "The burned worlds, the scattered ruins, the radiation signatures all. carefully crafted to convince you that humanity was extinct. We needed you to believe we were gone, so we could prepare for this moment. Around the Kithara flagship, the human fleet was taking formation with mathematical precision. Each ship was a work of art and engineering, designed not for conquest, but for protection. Their weapons were already charging, energy readings that made the Kithara's most powerful dreadnoughts look like children's toys. You have 60 seconds to begin your withdrawal, Morrison continued. Haven is under human protection, as are all the worlds you've marked for conquest in this sector. The age of your expansion is over. Zexthara's training reasserted itself. Despite her shock, she was still an Imperial Admiral. One fleet cannot stand against the might of the Kithara Empire. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. Yes, Morrison replied, and there was something almost sad in his voice. We know. We've been watching. We've been planning. And now we're here to ensure you conquer no more. The tactical display showed the truth of the situation. The Kithara fleet of 300 ships was completely surrounded by nearly 2,000 human vessels. More were decloaking every second, emerging from asteroid fields and nebulae like phantoms taking solid form. Zexthara realized with growing horror that the ghost warriors of legend weren't just real. They had been preparing for this encounter for over 2 centuries. And now, finally, the hunters had become the hunted. Asterisk. The first exchange of fire lit up the void like a newborn star. Admiral Zexthara had made her choice pride, and Imperial doctrine demanded she fight rather than retreat. The Kithara fleet's opening salvo was devastating by any conventional standard. Plasma beams and particle cannons designed to crack planetary shields striking out at the human vessels. That the humans simply weren't there when the weapons arrived. Report! Zexthara demanded as her gunners stared at their displays in confusion. Direct hits confirmed, Admiral, but the enemy ships... Tactical Officer Hexmar's voice trailed off. They're phasing in and out of normal space. Some kind of dimensional technology. Our weapons are passing through them. Captain Elena Vasquez watched the Kithara weapons fire harmlessly through her ship's hull as the remembrance briefly existed in parallel space. Phase drives online, she reported to her crew. Return to normal space and target their command vessel. Time to show them what 2.5 centuries of preparation accomplished. The human response was surgical. Instead of the massive broadsides the Kithara expected, each human ship fired a single, precisely targeted beam. The weapons looked almost delicate compared to the Empire's massive plasma cannons. But when they struck, entire sections of Kithara vessels simply ceased to exist. Destroyed, not damaged, but perfectly removed at the molecular level. Commander Velkas watched in horror as the Imperial Wrath, a dreadnought that had conquered 17 systems, developed a perfectly spherical hole through its center. What kind of weapons are those? Quantum. Disruptors, Elena muttered, remembering the decades of research that had gone into their development. They don't destroy matter, they convince it to stop existing. The battle was becoming a massacre, but not in the way anyone had expected. The Kithara fleet, despite its overwhelming numbers and firepower, was being systematically dismantled by opponents who fought like they could see the future. Every Kithara move was anticipated, every tactical formation countered before it could be completed. On Haven's surface, the colonists watched the sky through their shelter's reinforced viewers. Sarah Chun, the settlement's agricultural coordinator, held her daughter close as alien fire blazed overhead. "Are those the ghost warriors, Mama?" little Amy asked, pointing at the dark shapes dancing between the enemy ships. "Yes, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "They came back for us, just like they promised they would." The truth was more complex than the child could understand. The colonists of Haven weren't just refugees. They were the descendants of the humans who had volunteered to stay behind during the Great Evacuation, to maintain the illusion of a scattered, defenseless remnant, while the real human fleet built itself in the darkness between stars. For over 2 centuries, they had lived as bait, knowing that someday the trap would be sprung. Admiral Zexthara's flagship shuddered as another quantum beam carved away her starboard weapon arrays. Around her, the bridge crew worked frantically to maintain even basic functions. Half her fleet was already gone, not destroyed, but systematically disabled with the precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. "Admiral," Communications Officer Trillana called out, "we're receiving another transmission from the human fleet." Admiral Morrison's voice filled the bridge again, but now it carried a note of genuine sadness. "This is your final warning. Admiral, stand down and withdraw, or we will be forced to continue this engagement to its logical conclusion." Zexthara looked around her shattered bridge, at the tactical display showing the remains of her once proud fleet, at the officers who had followed her into what was clearly a carefully planned trap. For the first time in her career, she was facing an enemy that was simply unquestionably superior. "All ships," she commanded, her voice hollow with defeat, "cease fire and prepare for withdrawal." The ghost warriors had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same. 3 days after the Battle of Haven, Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the conference room of the space station, New Geneva, humanity's first open installation in over 2 centuries. The station, built from the hull of a converted asteroid, orbited Haven like a protective guardian, its weapons arrays clearly visible to any who might consider the world an easy target. Across from her sat Admiral Zexthara, no longer the proud imperial conqueror, but a defeated commander trying to understand how her entire worldview had been shattered in a matter of hours. The Kithara officer's compound eyes reflected the deep purple of humiliation and confusion. "Your people lied to the entire galaxy," Zexthara said, her mandibles clicking in agitation. "For centuries, we believed humans were extinct. The archaeological evidence, the radiation signatures on your former worlds, all fabricated." Elena nodded, pouring 2 cups of coffee from an old Earth-style pot. The familiar ritual helped ground her in the moment. The great deception was necessary. "We knew that if the Kithara Empire discovered humanity's true capabilities, you would have devoted your entire military to our extinction. We needed time to prepare." "Prepare for what?" The Kithara Admiral's voice carried genuine bewilderment. "You could have remained hidden forever. Why reveal yourselves now?" "Because hiding was never the endgame," Elena replied, sliding 1 cup across the table. "We've been watching your empire expand for 2.5 centuries, cataloging every world you've conquered, every species you've enslaved. We counted 1,847 different civilizations that have fallen to your forces. We couldn't stand by any longer." Through the conference room's viewport, both officers could see Haven's surface, where human engineers worked alongside Kithara prisoners of war to repair the damage from the aborted invasion. It was a strange sight, former enemies working together under the watchful eyes of human peacekeepers. "What happens now?" Zexthara asked, testing the strange human beverage cautiously. "Do you plan to conquer our empire as we conquered others?" Elena shook her head. "Conquest was never our goal. We're not interested in ruling the galaxy. We're interested in protecting it. The human Star Navy exists for one purpose: to ensure that what happened to all those 1,847 worlds never happens again." A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Elena activated the holographic display, revealing the face of Admiral Morrison aboard the flagship Defiance. "Captain Vasquez, we've received confirmation from the other sectors. Operation Ghost Dance was successful across all 17 target zones. The Kithara expansion fleets have been neutralized or withdrawn." Zexthara's eyes widened. 17. Sectors? How many ships do you have? Enough, Elena replied simply. We've spent nearly 2 centuries building our fleet, training our people, and preparing for this moment. Every asteroid field, every dead system, every patch of empty space you thought was useless. We were there, watching and waiting. The Kithara Admiral leaned back in her chair, the weight of realization settling over her. You turned our own arrogance against us. We dismissed the outer rim as worthless, ignored the spaces between stars as empty. We never imagined anyone could build an empire in the void. The void is only empty if you don't know how to look, Elena said, taking a sip of her coffee. Humanity learned to thrive in the darkness between worlds. We became the ghost warriors your people told stories about, not because we were myths, but because we chose to become legends. Admiral Morrison's image flickered slightly as the transmission continued. Captain, we're ready to begin Phase 2 of the operation. The refugee worlds are being contacted, and our diplomatic course is reaching out to the independent systems. It's time to build something new. Elena nodded, then turned back to Zexthara. Admiral, you have a choice to make. You can return to your empire and report what you've seen here, knowing that we'll be watching every move your people make. Or you can stay and help us build something better, a galaxy where species cooperate instead of conquer, where strength is used to protect rather than oppress. The Kithara officer stared out at Haven's surface, where the impossible was already happening, former enemies working together, building something new from the ashes of old conflicts. For the first time in her life, Admiral Zexthara began to imagine a galaxy where the Kithara Empire's 1,000-year reign of conquest might finally come to an end. The Ghost Warriors had returned not as conquerors, but as guardians. And perhaps, just perhaps, the galaxy was ready for a new kind of legend. Asterisk.